It was supposed to be a normal Saturday, the kind where laundry hums in the background and the house smells like fresh coffee and cinnamon muffins. But nothing about that day ended up being normal, because that was the day Ryan walked into my kitchen and didn't leave. He had just dropped my son Tyler off after a morning basketball scrimmage. They were sweaty, loud joking about missed shots and energy drinks. I barely noticed him at first. He was always around. Ryan had been Tyler's closest friend since 5th grade. Back then, he was all freckles and braces and oversized sneakers. Now, he was 6'1", lean tan, from long afternoons under the sun, with a voice that didn't quite match the memory I had of him. "Hey, Mrs. Dalton," he said with a casual grin. "You're staying for lunch, right?" Tyler asked. Ryan glanced at me. "Only if it's not a problem." It should have been a problem, but I smiled. Of course not. Later, Tyler disappeared into the shower, leaving Ryan at the kitchen counter, sipping a lemonade I didn't realize I had offered. That's when he said it. "You always smell like vanilla and something warm." I blinked. It wasn't the words. It was the way he said them. Like he wasn't talking to his best friend's mom. Like he was talking to a woman. I told myself I misunderstood. That I imagined the way his eyes lingered too long. That maybe it was the wine I had the night before clouding my judgment. But when I handed him a plate of leftover quiche and our fingers touched, I didn't pull away. Tyler came bounding down the stairs seconds later, hair damp smile wide, oblivious. Ryan winked at me behind his back, and my stomach dropped. Because in that instant, I knew something had changed. Something I couldn't take back. What scared me more? I didn't want to. After that day, I couldn't look at Ryan the same way again. Every time he came over, I found myself too aware of his cologne, the way his laugh filled the room, how he leaned on the kitchen counter like he belonged there. I started noticing things I had no business noticing. The way his sleeves pushed up just enough to reveal the faint outline of veins. The way he'd say thanks with a slow smile that felt like a secret. It wasn't that he did anything inappropriate. It was that I started reading meaning into the smallest things. And that was dangerous. Tyler never suspected a thing. He was just happy to have his best friend around. They'd play video games late into the night, crash on the couch, wake up to the smell of pancakes. And I kept playing my role hostess mother keeper of calm. But I could feel the tension building, a quiet hum beneath every casual interaction. Especially when I caught Ryan watching me while I washed dishes. Or when his shoulder would brush mine just a little too long when we passed in the hallway. One night, Tyler fell asleep early. Ryan stayed behind, claiming he had something to finish on his laptop. I brought him a cup of tea, I told myself. He smiled when I handed it to him. But he didn't take it right away. He just looked at me. "You always take care of everyone else," he said. "That's what moms do." "Yeah," he nodded, then paused. "But who takes care of you?" I didn't answer. Because the truth was, no one had asked me that in years. We sat at the table, a quiet hour ticking by. I told him about the job I never took, the novel I started and abandoned, the way the silence in the house had grown louder since the divorce. And he listened, not the way people usually do, half there, half somewhere else. He really listened. His eyes didn't wander, his hands didn't fidget. He was present, and that felt rare. When I stood up to take the empty mugs to the sink, he followed. He leaned in closer than he ever had. "You deserve more than quiet, Mrs. Dalton." His breath touched my cheek. My hand trembled as I reached for the faucet. I should have turned away, but instead, I looked up and didn't say a word. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was both of us tired of pretending something wasn't already happening in the spaces between words, glances, footsteps. All I know is that one moment we were inches apart, breath-mingling tea, forgotten silence roaring. And then his lips brushed mine. Soft, hesitant, like he was giving me time to pull away. But I didn't. I didn't pull away. The kiss deepened. Slowly, carefully. Like we were both waiting for reality to burst in and stop us. But it didn't. There were no slamming doors, no angry voices. Just the whisper of fabric, the rush of blood, the sound of my own heart racing like I was 20 again. He touched my face like I was fragile. Like he was afraid I'd shatter if he held on too tight. I wasn't sure if it made it better or worse, because it wasn't just physical. It was something else, something deeper, a loneliness meeting another, a craving for closeness in a house full of distance. When I finally stepped back, breathless and stunned, Ryan looked just as shaken. We shouldn't have, I said, voice breaking. I know. He's your best friend, and you're his mom. The words hung there like smoke. Heavy, toxic, impossible to wave away. He reached for my hand. I didn't let him take it. I turned off the kitchen light and went to my room. My husband's room, the room I hadn't truly shared in over a year. I lay in bed with the sheets pulled tight and stared at the ceiling until morning. I told myself it was a mistake, a slip, a one-time lapse in judgment fueled by emotion and late-night vulnerability. But in my heart, I knew better, because mistakes don't make your chest ache. They don't linger in your breath the next morning. They don't make you crave more. The next morning, the house buzzed like nothing had happened. My husband was humming in the kitchen, frying bacon in his favorite plaid robe. The scent should have made me smile it used to, but now it made my stomach twist. Ryan walked in freshly showered hair, still damp eyes avoiding mine, like we were strangers sharing a secret neither of us wanted to admit out loud. Morning, he muttered to no one in particular. "Coffee's fresh," my husband said, grinning as he flipped a slice of toast onto a plate. Big day ahead. The guys are coming over to watch the game. "You in?" Ryan smiled a little too tight. "Sure, wouldn't miss it." And just like that, he sat down across from me at the table. My eyes never left my cup. Every moment was a test. Every glance felt loaded. Did my husband notice how I tensed when Ryan laughed at his jokes? Did Ryan see how I flinched when his hand accidentally brushed mine as we reached for the butter? Was it all in my head? I don't know, but I felt it. The weight of that night pressed down on me like a secret I couldn't swallow. A trespass I couldn't undo. And yet, part of me didn't want to. Later that afternoon, the house filled with noise, friends, laughter, beer, chicken wings. I played the good wife, hosting, smiling, pretending. Pretending I hadn't betrayed the man sitting on the couch, cheering for the same team as his best friend. The same man who had kissed his wife just hours earlier. It was surreal, like watching your life through frosted glass. Close but untouchable. That night, as my husband snored beside me, I stared at my phone. One message, just one. "Can we talk?" I hovered over the keyboard. Deleted the text, typed it again. Deleted it again. Eventually, I just turned the screen off and placed the phone on the nightstand. But not before I saw his name at the top of a new message. "I can't stop thinking about you." I didn't reply. But I didn't delete it either. I just stared at it in the dark, while my husband slept peacefully beside me. I wish I could say that was the last message. That I ignored it. That I rolled over, kissed my husband on the cheek, and vowed never to let my thoughts stray again. But that would be a lie. Because the next night there was another message. And the night after that, a longer one. I didn't mean for it to happen. I just needed someone. You felt it too, didn't you? I didn't answer right away. Sometimes hours passed. Sometimes days. But I always answered. There's a dangerous intimacy in texting late at night. You're alone, vulnerable. The world is quiet and your thoughts are louder. And Ryan knew exactly what to say. I've never looked at anyone the way I look at you. I know it's wrong, but it also feels real. And the worst part, he wasn't lying. Because I knew exactly what he meant. 1 week later, my husband went out of town on business. He kissed me goodbye at the airport with a smile so trusting it made my eyes burn. Ryan came over that night. Not because we planned it, not officially, but because it was inevitable. I made tea. He helped me clean up dinner. And then we just stood in the kitchen, neither of us moving. Until he did. His fingers brushed a hair from my cheek. His voice barely above a whisper. I tried to stay away. I really did. I should have stepped back. But I didn't. The silence in the room was louder than any words. The air felt thick, charged. And then he kissed me again. Slower this time, surer. And I let him. I knew where it would lead. I knew what it meant. But I couldn't say no. Because in that moment, in that stolen, forbidden moment, I wasn't his best friend's wife. I was just a woman who hadn't felt seen in years. Later, lying in tangled sheets, I watched the shadows on the ceiling and asked myself the question that would haunt me for weeks to come. Was it worth it? I didn't have an answer. Not then. Maybe not ever. But the shame hadn't arrived yet. Only silence. And the sound of Ryan breathing beside me. I didn't sleep. I laid there beside Ryan, staring at the ceiling, watching the light shift as morning crept in through the blinds. He was peaceful, unbothered. One arm stretched across the sheets like he belonged there, like he always had. And me? I was already unraveling inside. Not because of what we did, but because of how natural it had felt. How heartbreakingly easy it was to fall into him. At 6:12 a.m., I slipped out of bed and into the bathroom. I stared at my reflection, looking for some sign of who I used to be. My lips were slightly swollen, my skin still flushed, my hair a mess from his fingers. But it was my eyes that undid me. They looked haunted, not with regret, but with fear. Because what we did couldn't be undone, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to undo it. He woke up before I expected him to, wrapped a blanket around his waist, walked up behind me at the kitchen counter, and placed a hand on the small of my back like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I can't pretend last night didn't happen," he said, his voice thick with sleep. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because if I spoke, I was afraid everything inside me would spill out the guilt, the confusion, the dangerous desire that still clung to me like sweat. Then came the words I dreaded. "Does he know?" My breath caught. I turned to face him. Of course not. He nodded once, solemn, almost hurt. "Do you regret it?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to lie. But he saw it in my eyes before I could speak. He stepped closer, too close. "I don't," he whispered. It would have been easier if he had said he did. Easier if he had pulled away, said it was a mistake, and walked out. But he didn't. Instead, he kissed me again just once, soft and slow. A goodbye kiss without saying goodbye. "If this is the last time," he whispered then, "I'm glad it happened." And then he left. I stood there in the silence of my home, listening to the front door close. My husband would be back tomorrow. Our life, as perfect and mundane as ever, would resume. But I wouldn't be the same woman he left behind. I had crossed a line, and I wasn't sure where it would lead me next. I didn't sleep. I laid there beside Ryan, staring at the ceiling, watching the light shift as morning crept in through the blinds. He was peaceful, unbothered. One arm stretched across the sheets like he belonged there, like he always had. And me, I was already unraveling inside. Not because of what we did, but because of how natural it had felt. How heartbreakingly easy it was to fall into him. At 6:12 a.m., I slipped out of bed and into the bathroom. I stared at my reflection, looking for some sign of who I used to be. My lips were slightly swollen, my skin still flushed, my hair a mess from his fingers. But it was my eyes that undid me. They looked haunted, not with regret, but with fear. Because what we did couldn't be undone. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to undo it. He woke up before I expected him to, wrapped a blanket around his waist, walked up behind me at the kitchen counter, and placed a hand on the small of my back like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I can't pretend last night didn't happen," he said, his voice thick with sleep. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because if I spoke, I was afraid everything inside me would spill out the guilt, the confusion, the dangerous desire that still clung to me like sweat. Then came the words I dreaded. "Does he know?" My breath caught. I turned to face him. Of course not. He nodded once, solemn, almost hurt. "Do you regret it?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to lie. But he saw it in my eyes before I could speak. He stepped closer, too close. "I don't," he whispered. It would have been easier if he had said he did. Easier if he had pulled away, said it was a mistake, and walked out. But he didn't. Instead, he kissed me again, just once, soft and slow. A goodbye kiss without saying goodbye. "If this is the last time," he whispered, "then I'm glad it happened." And then he left. I stood there in the silence of my home, listening to the front door close. My husband would be back tomorrow. Our life, as perfect and mundane as ever, would resume. But I wouldn't be the same woman he left behind. I had crossed a line, and I wasn't sure where it would lead me next. I cleaned everything. The bed sheets, the wine glasses, even the faint smudge of Ryan's handprint on the hallway wall. It was absurd, really, this frantic attempt to erase the physical evidence when the real mess was inside me. I scrubbed until my knuckles turned red, as if somehow I could bleach away what had happened. As if guilt could be laundered out of linen. But every time I stopped, my mind filled the silence with his voice, his touch, his words. "If this is the last time, I'm glad it happened." The next day, my husband returned. He smelled like the road gasoline, coffee, and exhaustion. He kissed me on the cheek like always. "I missed you," he said. I smiled, lied. "Me too." He dropped his bags, turned on the game, and fell asleep within 20 minutes on the couch. It should have made me feel safe, reassured. Instead, it made me feel like a traitor. And still, my heart didn't race with fear of being caught. It raced with the memory of not wanting to stop. The real torment wasn't the risk of exposure. It was the fact that I didn't hate what happened. In those hours with Ryan, I had felt seen, beautiful, desired, heard. Things I hadn't felt in years, even if that truth burned like acid on my conscience. Later that night, I received a text. Ryan, I keep replaying it. Over and over, not to torment myself, but because it was the first time in years I felt something that real. I stared at the screen for too long, typing, deleting, typing again. Finally, I replied, please don't text me again. I can't. The 3 little dots appeared, then vanished. No reply came. I turned off my phone, sat in the dark, and realized something terrifying. I didn't feel relief. I felt loss. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a fracture, a tear in the fabric of a life I'd convinced myself was whole. And once something's torn, it never lies flat again. Days passed, then a week, and still nothing from Ryan. No texts, no accidental run-ins, no late-night apologies. It was as if he'd taken my message to heart and vanished entirely. I should have felt grateful. Instead, I felt abandoned by the very thing I'd begged for. Meanwhile, life at home stumbled forward. Dinners were eaten, laundry folded, conversations held with all the depth of puddles after rain. My husband noticed nothing. Or maybe he noticed too much and chose silence over confrontation. Some betrayals don't arrive with slammed doors. Some arrive with awkward silences and the way eyes shift too quickly. One evening, my son came home from school in a mood. He slammed his door, refused dinner. Later, I found him in the garage, angrily pounding a basketball against the floor. What's wrong, baby? I asked. He glared at me. Ryan hasn't talked to me in days, just ghosted me. What did I do? My stomach dropped. That word ghosted echoed like a verdict. Because I knew it wasn't about him. It was about me. He's just going through something, I think I said quietly. But even I didn't believe the lie I was selling. And my son, my sweet, trusting son, looked at me with narrowed suspicion. Did you guys fight or something? I froze. Just long enough. Long enough for him to notice the delay. Mom? No, of course not. Why would you think that? You're acting weird. I smiled too quickly, hugged him too tightly. Changed the subject with a clumsy, nervous laugh. But the damage was already done. Because now a seed had been planted. Not just in my son, but in me. The seed of what would happen if this truth ever came out. If this sin, this moment, this night was ever given a name. And what scared me more than being found out was how much I still missed him. Even now, even with everything to lose. A week turned into 10 days, then 14. I told myself I was getting better, that the distance was a cure, that I could move on. But healing is not forgetting, and silence is not closure. I saw him again for the first time at the grocery store. Of all places. He was 2 aisles over, holding a box of cereal like it meant nothing. Like that night meant nothing. I stopped breathing. My hands trembled around the cart. I didn't plan to approach him. I didn't even plan to be there. But my body, traitorous, desperate, moved on its own. Ryan! He turned. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then came a half smile. Not smug, not cruel. But the kind that holds pain behind it. Mrs. D. He still called me that, as if dragging me back into the safe illusion we used to live in. We didn't talk much, just stood there surrounded by canned beans and uncomfortable truths. I didn't mean to ghost you, he said finally. I laughed softly, sad. You did what I asked. Doesn't mean it was easy. Silence. Then he looked at me, really looked at me. I still think about it, about you, about that night. I didn't want to hear that. I did want to hear that. Because there it was proof that I wasn't alone in this ache. That the night hadn't been some fever dream I'd imagined. I can't talk here, I whispered. Then don't, he replied. He turned and walked away. Not a single glance back. I went home with groceries I didn't need. Filled the fridge with lies I couldn't keep cold. That night, I stared at my husband sleeping peacefully beside me. He looked so innocent, so unaware. And I hated how that made me feel like the monster. Because I wasn't a monster. I was just broken, starved, human. And Ryan Ryan was the only one who saw the cracks and didn't turn away. The next day, there was a note slipped under my front door. One sentence, no name. If you still want to talk, you know where to find me. And the worst part, I did. I sat with that note for hours, folded, unfolded, read, reread, burned it in my mind until it haunted me, even with my eyes closed. You know where to find me. Yes, I did. And I also knew I shouldn't go. But what does shouldn't mean to someone who's already crossed every line? It was a Tuesday. Rain tapped against the window like an old friend with bad timing. My husband was out of town for a conference. My son had returned to college just the week before. I was alone. Alone in the kind of silence that doesn't comfort you, but suffocates you. So I put on my coat and told myself I'd just go for a walk. That's not what I did. His apartment was in a part of town I rarely visited. A small, dimly lit building with cracked steps and ivy crawling along the bricks. As I stood at his door, I felt the wind on my neck. Or maybe it was guilt brushing past me, whispering, "You don't belong here." But my knuckles betrayed me. 3 knocks. Quiet, hesitant, desperate. He opened it slowly, and there he was, barefoot shirt, wrinkled eyes, tired. Like he hadn't slept either. "I didn't think you'd actually come," he said. Neither did I. We didn't talk right away. He led me inside and offered me tea. I said yes, even though I didn't want it. I needed something to hold, something to focus on besides the closeness of the space, the familiarity of his presence. He sat across from me, elbows on knees, eyes, not on me, but on the floor. "You said you wanted to talk," he finally murmured. I don't know what to say. "Then don't say anything." I looked at him, and in that moment, the tension returned. The same pull that had existed in the hallway outside my bedroom that night. The same silence that spoke louder than anything we could have confessed. I stood to leave, and that's when he reached for my hand, just like he had before. "You don't have to run anymore," he whispered. My breath caught in my throat, because part of me wanted to run. But another part, the broken, starved, bleeding part, wanted to stay, so I didn't move. He stood. We were inches apart now. "I haven't touched anyone since you," he said. Because nothing, no one, felt as real. I didn't know what was worse, the ache in his voice, or the echo of it inside my chest. And just like that, my resolve melted again. I don't know how long I was there. Minutes, hours. All I know is that I left before the sun came up. And as I stepped back into my car, heart pounding and hands trembling, I knew something had shifted. We hadn't done anything, not physically, but emotionally. We opened a door we would never be able to close again. And this time, there was no storm to blame. Just the truth. I drove home with trembling fingers on the steering wheel. Every red light felt like judgment. Every passing car, a witness. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I could barely look at my own front door. The house was dark, still asleep. The kind of quiet that normally comforted me now only made me feel like a thief returning to a place I no longer belonged. I slipped inside like a ghost. Shoes off at the door. Coat draped silently over the chair. I crept up the stairs with guilt clinging to my heels. He was in bed, peaceful, snoring softly. A familiar rise and fall of his chest beneath the blankets. My husband. The man I had built a life with. The man who trusted me. I stood there watching him for a long time, the way you might look at a stranger you once knew. And then I slipped into bed beside him, curling up like nothing had happened. Because that's what we do, right? We lie with our bodies, and we lie with our silence. The next morning, the kitchen smelled of bacon and coffee. He was already up humming to himself, while flipping pancakes, his usual weekend ritual. "Morning, sleepyhead," he said, kissing my cheek. His lips were warm, familiar, safe, and I wanted to shrink away from them. "You okay? You look tired." "Just didn't sleep well," I replied with a smile that cracked at the edges. "You should have called me last night. I would have stayed up." I nodded. I didn't have the courage to tell him I hadn't wanted him to. Later that day, my son called. He wanted to check in, said he might come home next weekend and maybe bring a friend or two. "Anyone I know?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Yeah, you remember Daniel, right?" Of course I did. I remembered his voice, his hands, his stare. "He's probably gonna crash with us if that's okay." I swallowed hard. "Sure, I managed. That's fine." "Fine." The word echoed like a bell, tolling the death of my sanity. I wasn't fine. I was unraveling. one thread at a time. That night, I sat in the bathroom with the shower running, letting the steam fog up the mirror while I stared at my reflection. Who was this woman? The one who smiled and kissed her husband like everything was normal. The one who said sure when she meant please no. The one who couldn't stop thinking about her son's best friend. I hated her, but I also understood her. She was lonely, starved for attention, gasping for something real in a life that had become predictable and gray. I pressed a towel to my face and let out a muffled scream. No one heard me. No one ever does. And when I climbed into bed that night, I realized something chilling. The guilt no longer felt like a weight. It was becoming familiar, like a second skin. Something I wore because taking it off would mean facing everything I didn't want to admit. That maybe I didn't feel bad enough to stop. The week passed slowly, agonizingly so. I walked through each day like someone stuck between two worlds. The one where I was a wife and mother, and the one where I was a woman with a secret and a craving she couldn't silence. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. I told myself I wouldn't respond. I told myself it was over. But temptation doesn't knock just once. It comes back, relentlessly. And on Thursday night it did. A message. Daniel, I can't stop thinking about you. I'm sorry if that makes it worse. It didn't make it worse. It made it harder to breathe. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. Typing, deleting, typing again. And finally, me, he's coming home this weekend, right? He replied almost instantly. Daniel, yeah, I'll be there too. Me, then don't. Please, don't come. He didn't respond right away, and I hated how much that hurt, until he did. Daniel, too late. I already promised him. Saturday came, and with it Daniel. The moment he stepped through our front door, the air shifted. He hugged my son, laughed with my husband, dropped his bag in the spare room, and looked at me like he knew every part of me I'd rather forget. His eyes didn't just glance, they burned. And I tried to act like I didn't feel it too. Dinner was unbearable. We sat around the table like a perfect little family. But every time he laughed at one of my husband's jokes, every time he clinked his glass or passed the bread, I felt like I was sitting on the edge of a confession. And it wasn't just the risk of being caught. It was the risk of not being able to stop myself. Later that night, I cleaned the kitchen while the men watched football in the living room. Normal, innocent, predictable. Until he appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame like he belonged there. Need help with those, he asked, gesturing toward the dishes. I'm fine, I said a little too quickly. You're not, he replied softly. He stepped closer, too close. My pulse betrayed me fluttering beneath my skin like wings trying to escape. Don't, I whispered. Then look me in the eyes and say, you don't want to see me again. I couldn't, because it would have been a lie. The next morning, I told myself it was just tension. Just a silent war we could win with enough distance. But I hadn't accounted for proximity, or silence, or a house that echoed with too much memory and too much want. When everyone left for a last-minute beer run, Daniel stayed behind, alone, with me, in the kitchen, again. Just like before, he didn't touch me. He didn't need to. His words were enough. You're not who I thought you were, he said. Neither are you, I whispered back. What happened next wasn't loud. There were no fireworks, no crashing waves of chaos. It was worse. It was quiet, intentional. I let him kiss me again, and I kissed him back, knowing full well this time. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice. There was no thunder this time. No lightning storm to blame. Just the soft hum of the fridge, the ticking of the kitchen clock, and the silence between us that screamed louder than any truth. His lips found mine again, hesitant like asking permission. Mine responded like they already had an answer. I didn't pull away. I didn't stop him. And in that moment, I stopped being just a woman who once crossed a line. I became someone willing to live on the other side of it. When the front door clicked again, our cue that my husband and son were back, we broke apart just in time. He walked out through the back hallway, avoiding eye contact. And I stood there, hands trembling, wiping my lips with the back of my hand like it could erase the shame. But it didn't. It never does. That evening, the guilt settled in like fog. Thick, clinging, impossible to see through. I watched my husband laugh with Daniel over nachos. Watched him clap him on the back and say things like, "You're the brother I never had." I smiled. I played the part. But inside, I was unraveling. When bedtime came, I lay next to my husband, his breathing deep and steady, so unlike mine, which was shallow and ragged with the weight of what I'd done. Again, my phone buzzed under the pillow. One message: Daniel, if this is wrong, why does it feel like the only thing that's real? I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. Sunday morning came too fast. Daniel packed early, too early. Leaving so soon, my husband asked. Work stuff, Daniel replied. I've got a deadline. They hugged. They laughed, and I stood there silent. As he walked past me on the way to the door, he didn't touch me, didn't say a word, but he whispered with his eyes, "This isn't over," and I hated how much I wanted him to be right. For the next few days, I tried to distract myself. I folded laundry that didn't need folding, cleaned closets that hadn't been touched in months, but nothing helped, because you can't scrub away the parts of you that chose the mess. Then Thursday came, and with it a package. No return address, no note. Inside, a simple necklace, a small silver pendant, a charm shaped like a flame. No words needed. I knew exactly who it was from, and what it meant. He was still thinking about me, still burning, and God help me, so was I. I stared at that tiny flame-shaped pendant, like it held the answer to a question I never meant to ask. I should have thrown it away, buried it in the trash, pretended it never arrived. But instead, I put it on. The chain slid over my collarbone, cool and silent, like the first lie you tell yourself when you're trying to believe you're still a good person. That afternoon, my husband was fixing the shed. He asked if I wanted to help. I said I had a migraine. He kissed my forehead and told me to rest. I smiled and watched him walk away, still trusting, still blind. And I hated myself for how easy it was to lie to him now, how natural it had become. I wasn't the same woman he married, and I wasn't sure if I ever would be again. By the time the sun went down, I'd made a decision. I texted Daniel, "We need to talk, one last time." He replied within seconds. "Your place, tomorrow, noon." Just 2 words, but my heart flipped. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of guilt this time, but because of something more dangerous. Longing. What was wrong with me? Why did this feel so intoxicating? He was my son's friend. Someone I used to see as a kid eating pizza on my couch, and now I was letting him ruin everything I'd built. But deep down, I knew the truth. He wasn't ruining it. I was. The next day, I sent my husband out on an errand. He kissed me before leaving like he always did. Like he still loved the woman I used to be. And then he was gone. At exactly noon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Daniel standing there, clean-shaven, nervous, holding nothing but eye contact. "Hey," he said. "Come in," I replied, already trembling. He stepped in. We stood in silence for a moment. "We can't do this anymore," I said quickly, the words tumbling out before my courage could collapse. "I know," he said, "but I'm not here for that." "Then why are you here?" He looked around the house, this house where so many lies now lived, then locked eyes with me. "To tell you something," he said, voice low. "Tell me what?" He stepped closer, paused, and whispered. "That night, I didn't just want you. I felt you needed to be seen. And I saw you. I still do." My breath caught in my throat. He wasn't seducing me. He was understanding me. And somehow, that made it worse. Because you can walk away from temptation. But it's much harder to walk away from someone who truly sees you. I didn't kiss him. Not this time. I asked him to leave. And he did. Quietly. Without protest. Without goodbye. And when I closed the door behind him, I finally let the tears come. Because letting go of the wrong person, when they made you feel right for the first time in years, hurts in a way you can't confess out loud. Not even to yourself. Days passed, then weeks. Life resumed its rhythm: groceries, work, laundry, dinner by 6. My husband went back to fixing things around the house as if nothing had ever been broken. But I knew better. I had broken something invisible, something sacred. And now, no matter how normal everything looked, I could feel the cracks beneath every conversation. One night while we were brushing our teeth, he glanced at me in the mirror. "You've been quiet lately." I froze mid-rinse. "Just tired," I said. He nodded slowly. "You sure everything's okay?" I looked him straight in the eyes, and for a moment, I wanted to confess, to tell him everything. But I didn't. Not because I wanted to lie, but because I didn't know how to tell him I'd already betrayed the version of myself he believed in. The truth I hadn't seen or heard from Daniel since that final afternoon. He didn't text, didn't call, didn't follow up. It was as if he disappeared the moment I closed the door and took my shame with him. But he didn't take my memories, or my guilt, or the ache that remained when someone sees you fully and then walks away. One Sunday, I ran into Daniel's mother at the store. We exchanged polite smiles. She mentioned he was moving away some job across the country. He said he needed a fresh start. She smiled. I nodded, said something generic about wishing him well. But inside, something shifted. Not pain, not sadness, just a hollow sense of finality. It was over. And now all that remained was the version of me that had to live with it. Months later, I found that pendant again, the little flame on the chain. I held it in my palm. It still felt cold, but it didn't burn anymore. I walked to the backyard, dug a small hole, and buried it beneath the old rosebush. Not as punishment, not as closure, but as a reminder that even the most passionate sparks, when buried deep enough, can be smothered before they ignite everything. Today, I sit with my husband on the porch. We watch the sunset sipping wine like we used to. He rests his hand on mine. And for the first time in a long time, I don't flinch. Because even though part of me will always remember, another part has decided to stay. Not for perfection, not for pretending, but for peace. Because in the quiet aftermath of what almost ruined me, I found the strength to choose stillness over fire. And that somehow felt like the bravest choice of all.